But I think I've never seen a setup like that. I think this setup in ETH is better than Bitcoin was in March 2020. And I think it's the rise of Ethereum. Because Ethereum is growing at twice the pace with more applications, more developers, and a lot of other things. And that has actually taken money away from Bitcoin. And the
has that core base of super fans, but at the end of the day, we're several years into it and we still haven't seen a breakout hit come off of this platform. At some time, I think Ethereum is going to have to put up or shut up.
Now, it is difficult to know which one is really going to change the trajectory, but really it's that adoption curve. Is something really changing that? Now, there is one thing that changed it, I think, and I think it's the rise of Ethereum. Because Ethereum is growing at twice the pace with more applications, more developers, and a lot of other things. And that has actually taken money away from Bitcoin. And the other thing is, there was a lot of very hardcore Bitcoiners that fear that other token ecosystems could attract capital. And to therefore fight it, this Bitcoin toxicity and stuff has come into the story. And what that did was the reverse. It always happens. Most people who have a fear make it happen by mistake. And so what happened is a lot of people went, you know what, I don't need all of that, so Ethereum kind of makes sense to me. So I think there's been a bit of that, and Ethereum's growing at twice the speed because of that. But I think that will settle down. I think it'll settle down once the price starts going back up again and Bitcoin establishes its trend. I think that level of fear within the community, it's the fear of change, I think that will die down. So overall, nothing's changed. Well, I just wrote a whole piece on this in Global Macro Investor, and the title gives it away, The World's Greatest Trade. And I published that last week, and I just said, listen, look at what's going on here. So ETH right now has the fastest adoption rate at scale of any of the protocols. There's huge demand. NFTs are the next wave. There's so much going on in the space. And against that, you've got the move of the coins off exchange for staking, which is a huge number and growing every day. You've then got a bunch of people holding it, so they put it off exchange and in wallets. So you went into yesterday with only 13% of the free float of Ethereum available. And it's got exponential demand. And then you reduce the supply by burning, by whatever margin. Actually, it ended up being roughly what I thought it would be, which was more than most people thought. It's actually quite a big deal. And the next phase after this is that the price is going to be rising just because we're in that point in the market and the demand is big. And so everybody is going to be incentivized to stake. And you can see it in the number of coins in exchanges at 13%. This is going to fall to below 10. There's no free float. And the demand is going up exponentially. We're going to see an exponential price rise. That is the only outcome of this. Now, when we get to the ETH 2.0, let's say it's March next year, and everybody unlocks, there could be a complete collapse. But I think I've never seen a setup like that. I think this setup in ETH is better than Bitcoin was in March 2020. You rarely get a setup like this because the other part is the macro setup. The macro setup is, I think global growth comes out weaker for the next 9 months. And I think the Federal Reserve, even if they talk about tapering, will end up accelerating QE. That's how I think this plays out. That's what the bond market is telling you. Once crypto markets sniff this out, they're going to explode. So what we've got is a macro that's potentially there. Macro stories develop slowly, right? They're not quick narratives. It's month by month data. So we will see this over the next 3 months, that we will probably have a global slowdown. We'll probably have the Bank of Japan having to print for the reasons we just talked about, that Japan has totally screwed up the virus. They will do it in size. Chinese economy is in the toilet right now. They will probably do something. So we've got stimulus coming from Asia. Do the Fed do more? Do the Europeans do more? Well, generally they have. Generally they've generally cut rates twice after every recession. So they're likely to do it again for a number of technical reasons. So we have rate cuts and this perfect setup with no supply and demand in the middle of an exponential bull market. I mean, you don't get these often in your life.
One of the things that you had mentioned when we were first starting to talk about the regulation side is this the catch up that they're playing, and that you weren't worried about is this a security or not type of thing. I, by the way, share that. When I read Gensler's speech, I was like, listen, if our regulatory conversation in the US is the SEC reasserting its authority to determine what is and isn't a security, and that it's ultimately about investor protections, that is a conversation that's so easy relative to the systemic risk. This is a threat to the system kind of challenge, right? They are fundamentally different conversations. Potentially on the other side of that is DeFi. And, we don't have that much information yet around just how sophisticated the understanding of Yellen or the Treasury Secretary's, the Treasury Department's understanding of these things are. But it seems like it's very clear that stablecoins are a lot scarier to them than Bitcoin, for example. And it's all of a sudden, DeFi is a phrase that is coming up in every speech, right? What's your take on the regulatory risk around DeFi right now?
So again, if we go back to what we talked about before, they fear change. And this is something where they lose control. Because the cozy world in the past was the Federal Reserve, the banks and the Treasury were all this nice little group that talked to each other and set interest rates. So there was an old friend of mine, friend of my father's, and he was one of the old English discount brokers. A discount broker in England was the guys who set the money market rates. But he was of the very old school. So when I knew him, he was still in his 80s. He was in his early 80s, and he would go on the train to London in his silk top hat, black top hat, his waistcoat, and he would go to the Bank of England on a Friday and set the discount rate, and then they would have a long lunch and drink port and then come home after a 4-hour lunch, and that's how the money markets operated.
The question is the 7 years that you were mentioning or longer that it's going to be are going to be a lot of the powers that be resetting how they can interact with this new thing, what their power is relative to that thing. And boy, is the infrastructure bill amendment battle just like exhibit A of that through that lens, of what is our power going to be in this new world.
It's also going to be generational. So as the baby boomer generation leaves its position of power, leaves the labor force, and they're getting older, and they'll be at the end of their life cycle, and that gets exchanged with the millennial generation blended with Gen X and blended with Gen Z, then you'll see change. And people will be open to wholesale change. It's that kind of fourth turning moment, and this is what we're going through. We're in the middle of the fourth turning right now, and you can feel it and see it everywhere. And it will change. You see whether people like her or not, people like AOC are so wildly different and wildly dangerous to the existing status quo because she completely understands how to navigate the new world. And I think we will see, I think that change, the political changes to come, and out with the old and in with the new, is the thing we will see over the next 7-8 years.